Welcome to Soil to Soul, a womb health love story. Womb Wednesday is a monthly digital content series curated by Black Millennials for Flint that focuses on the intersection of maternal health and environmental justice through a Black, Latinx, and Indigenous lens. Womb Wednesday is a signature program from Black Millennials for Flint's Black and Brown Alliance, which amplifies the need for a strong, united front between Black and Brown folks to actively dismantle white supremacy through improving the quality of Black and Brown births. Womb Wednesday airs every fourth Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6 p.m. Central on Facebook Live and YouTube Live.
The womb is every human being's first environment, and the soil that helps to develop the foods we eat nourishes the body as a new soul, a new spirit grows inside the womb. This session focuses on the importance of the connection between soil health, food justice, and improved birthing outcomes. We also would like to encourage you, our viewers, to follow Black Millennials for Flint on Twitter at BM4Flint to engage in our live tweeting. Use the hashtag Womb Wednesdays. My name is Anna Rodney, and I am the Executive Director of MomCares and one half of the dynamic duo for Womb Wednesdays. I'm so happy to be here and to see everybody out in the world. And so that is who I am, and I will pass it to my sister, Cynthia.
Thank you, sis. My name again is Cynthia Gutierrez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I am zooming in from the lonely land of East Oakland, California. I'm a reproductive justice activist, full spectrum doula, cultural strategist, and abortion storyteller. It is my pleasure to have our guests introduce themselves. Would y'all like to start off by just saying who you are and what you're about for our audience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm already feeling so much amazing energy. My name is Eloisa Trinidad, and I am the Executive Director at Chili's on Wheels. I am calling in from Occupy Lenape land in New York. My work really focuses on the intersections of food justice, environmental justice, and multi-species justice. We are a vegan organization that makes veganism accessible to communities in need. We do that through direct food relief, fighting for agricultural and food policy that benefits historically marginalized people, so Black, Indigenous, and other people of the global majority, and really shaping our communities to create alternate systems of survival while we fight for systemic change.
LaTricea Adams, founder, CEO, and president of Black Millennials for Flint. I feel so honored to be in this space. I'm typically behind the scenes, so I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I'm actually calling in from Chickasaw land in Memphis, Tennessee. Really excited to talk about a much needed conversation around the kinship between our bodies and the land. As a person of both African and Latino descent, I definitely enjoy talking about not rekindling, because we already got that connection, but just amplifying how there is such a kinship between people of color and the land. Glad to be here.
Thank you both so much for joining us. So let's get into the discussion. So when we speak about environmental justice, It encompasses all aspects of human rights, which includes access to high quality healthcare, be it mental health, physical health, and spiritual health, and also lead-free foods. Lead exposure and lead poisoning pose irreversible threats to childbirthing people, ranging from low birth weight to miscarriage and even death. Nutrition, education, and food justice is at the core of our practical lead prevention messaging in maternal health due to the consumption of vitamin C, iron, and calcium being associated with slowing down the absorption of lead in our blood. And I would like to hear more about how in your work do you describe how food justice is critical to maternal health, including breastfeeding and chest feeding, and reproductive justice during and after pregnancy?
Thank you, Anna. At Chili Stone Wheels, we get people who are pregnant, calling on us for our services and what we offer. And I think that's one of the toughest and most challenging parts, is knowing that a pregnant person doesn't have access to food, especially healthy food. Food insecurity for maternal health is extremely important. The child that's growing in that womb is already shaping the way they eat by what they're absorbing, not when they come out of the womb and are born, but while they're in that womb, right? And so for folks who are pregnant, who experience food insecurity, it has been linked to preterm birth as well as postpartum depression. And that's besides all of the other health issues that we're talking about when we don't have access to food security, right? And to food access and access of healthy food, which is diabetes, blood pressure, all those things also apply to maternal health. So it's linked to so much. And beyond that, if that child is food insecure while in the womb, it has long-term effects for that child. They can experience obesity later on in life and have irreversible damage. So it's extremely important for the development of the child, but also for the mental and physical health of the person who is carrying that child.
Yeah, so I'd also like to add to that. So I think one of the things from the work that we do with Black Millennials for Flint is around education. So I'll be the first to admit that honestly, it wasn't until the Flint water crisis occurred that I was even aware of all of the detrimental effects that occur with lead. Let alone even when we think about food and how sometimes lead can even end up in your food, and the connection between land and growing, and why it's so critical from an educational perspective that we understand all the ways in which we can be exposed to lead. I think literally saves our lives. In addition to that, it also makes me personally really invested in being a bit more intentional about what I'm putting into my body. Even sometimes we may think that we are doing a good job with bringing healthy fruits and vegetables into our diets. It's also really important that we understand like where these fruits and vegetables are coming from. Depending on where your produce, your vegetables, your fruits are grown, it could potentially be in proximity to toxic land. There could potentially be residue or residuals from pesticides. It's a myriad of things that you have to take into consideration. And it doesn't mean that it should be bleak, that it has to be difficult, but with Black Millennials for Flint, we really try to create a platform where we educate and also try to provide access to viable solutions to ensure that when we're just trying to live, right? When we're just trying to eat, we're just trying to make it, that we try to mitigate some of those obstacles as much as possible. And that's through awareness, that's through boots on the ground, that's with some of our programming where we are in community with like my sisters on this panel. We're integrating spaces with doulas, midwives, and social birth workers to ensure that in all forms and all mediums, we're trying to protect mommies and babies.
I think it's very important that education piece and knowing what exactly is going into our bodies and how we can support ourselves and our community. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with LaTricea. Education is such a huge part. And for us also, that's something that we focus on. We have a program called the LIFT program, which really focuses on lower income folks who want this education, who want to know how to eat healthier, how to, reconnect. And, it's a vegan education from a decolonial, anti-colonial perspective. And we get those questions often. What if it's not organic? Even within the organic spectrum in this country, there are so many chemicals that are allowed and are not allowed in other countries. And so we don't have an absolute organic food, but it is very important to address the chemicals that are also in animal bodies that people eat, the antibiotics. And so we are ingesting all of these things. Over 99% of our food that is animal-based comes from factory farms. So you can imagine the quality and the conditions that these animals live in. And so through this program, what we look to do is really match someone with a mentor of their same socioeconomic background, ethnic background, as well as their gender identity, which is really important in the process of affecting any change in anyone, right? You need that support system, you need that community. And so we really seek to build community and welcome individuals in spaces where they can relate to and identify with.
Eloisa, I really want to uplift something you just said that I really want our audience to take in. What I was hearing is you saying that it's not just the education, and how do we make this culturally relevant? For me, one of the things that I have found problematic when it comes to educating low income, folks of color, folks with disability, just folks at the margins about food justice, is that there seems to be a stigma around, oh, you can't eat certain types of things, or how do you not know this? And really shaming individuals. But it sounds like your program is very intentional about matching people, making sure that folks are uplifted in this educational journey.
Yeah, so as with so many other things, the modern food justice movement actually has a very racist background. When this term was coined and people started to get active, now Indigenous people and Black people and people of the global majority had been doing this work. But when folks and settlers took over this work, they were very focused on eating local and eating organic and healthy, as if everyone had access to it, and did not include race in the definition of why food justice work needs to be done, why food sovereignty work needs to be done. And so, that's the history of it. And so it's not surprising that has continued in many ways. Cultural relevancy, it's something that we bring up when we talk about policy. We see continuously the policies are made without including the folks that they're mostly going to impact. And people won't eat food unless they relate to that food, right? And so we have a diverse population in the United States. What we have seen even here in New York during the pandemic is millions and millions of dollars thrown at food, pre-made food that was supposed to go to communities. And it created an amount of food waste that I had never seen before because the food was not culturally relevant. And that is just such a missing mark. And not only culturally relevant, right? Cultural relevancy means that your food has to taste good. You have to be able to relate to it. And, it has to take into consideration your beliefs as well. So if you're a part of a certain religion or you do not eat certain things for ethical reasons, that should be provided to you. Food justice and food sovereignty is not, we're going to throw food at you and you eat whatever we have, right? And that is extremely dehumanizing. And that's what a lot of the work has been. It's either pushing people in the direction of, eat local and organic as if everyone has access to it, or you're going to eat what we are giving you and not giving people a choice. And everybody should have a choice to eat healthy, nutritious food that they like, not just people who have the financial means to do so.
Preach, because I know I'm not eating no food that I don't like. And this is a great segment to my question for you all. While we're seeing more awareness to Indigenous and ancestral relationships with cultivating the land, specifically with BIPOC or folks of the global majority, however, immigrant birthing people who work as farm laborers are in extreme danger with increased exposure to chemicals and pesticides and other unhealthy exposure to agricultural toxins. According to a survey conducted by the California Rural Legal Assistance, 66.7% of respondents indicated that they received state disability insurance due to chronic exposure to pesticides while serving as a farm laborer. As y'all know, I rep Cali hella hard, and I have to give a shout out to one of my favorite groups. They're called Campesina Womb Justice, and they're on Instagram, and they're a mutual aid project organizing womb care kits for Indigenous farm worker families on the California Central Coast, specifically Watsonville, California. Have to give a shout out to my sister Irene for being a part of this project, and they bring these incredible womb kits to Indigenous farm workers. It contains everything from menstrual pads to different herbs to cash just for families, particularly those who are pregnant. And so my question to you all is, what advice would you give to birthing people or allies of birthing people who are interested in improving the work conditions in the farm labor industry? And any one of y'all can jump in.
Yeah, so I'll start, and I'm just gonna be real frank. You have to start giving a damn, period. And what I mean by that is when we literally, every bite of anything that we're trying to ingest that we eat, think about how that got to you. Think about all of the steps that were involved for you to get this like on your plate, on your palate. I think when we talk about decolonizing food, I think that colonizing part in there is actually making things disparate where we don't understand or we don't recognize and are not as thoughtful about how food comes to be. And again, like that connection, that was by design, that was systemic. When we think about even like on these stolen lands that we're on, even how like the connection between Indigenous people and pilgrims or colonizers and how it became violent just from the origins of how we think about food. So I think that that's the first part, is to be very thoughtful, especially, and this is to white allies that might be listening, is to just be very thoughtful about how you get what you get, right? I also think that it's important that when you think about the process of food to table, that you also think about and you picture and envision the people that make this possible. So I want to give a real lived experience from today, and this will actually be a week from today. We had a WEJAC, a White House Environmental Justice Council call, and we had some folks to call in to make public comment that literally spoke to being exposed to pesticides. And I was very excited that there was accessibility for folks to be heard, but then also it was gut-wrenching. Right? It was gut-wrenching that outside of like all of this exhaustive work that's associated like with farming, y'all, that's hard. I even think about like me and my granny, like trying to get me up to scale around how to grow. That's hard. I did not succeed. And thinking about that being like your whole livelihood, and you literally having to get on this call and literally fight for your humanity. Right. So I think, and not to go too deep into it, but I think that it's really important that when we think about food, we think about it from a spiritual perspective and how there's a connection between like your soul, and that the human beings that were involved, whoever whoever you pray to, your supreme being, and how that all coalesces and connects together, and literally how that gets to your belly. I think that if you think about it from that perspective, I think it would really shift the culture and temperament with our relationship with food.
I agree so much with you, LaTricea. I think that, you know, our relationship to our natural environment, to food, to our beyond human relatives, as I like to call our fellow animals, has been so interrupted, right? It has been centuries, over 529 years, right, since the invasion. And so for those of us who are reconnecting, and we've always been here, right? We've always been connected, but that has been interrupted, is to really take in our ancestors and realize that we have been guardians for so long, that we have protected this planet, that we have protected other beings, that we have eaten from the earth. And that is the relationship that we have to decolonize, right? It's that relationship that has been interrupted, and take that back. And for the folks who are in a position of power, support the groups that are fighting for our farm workers. Our farm workers really face some of the biggest struggles in this country. We're talking about enslavement, rape, beyond being exposed to all these horrific chemicals that is leading to their being sick and dying. We're talking about children, right? In this country, children can do farm work and be enslaved, and people always think that it's somewhere else. No, but it's here. If you're 12 years old, you're able to work on these fields. You're able to be exposed. So think of somebody who is in their reproductive years, how much this is affecting their womb, how much this is affecting the reproductive system. The Food Empowerment Project is a really amazing organization that focuses on food justice at the intersection of plant-based and veganism with farm workers. And they do amazing work to support farm workers. It was founded by a Chicana woman, Lauren Ornelas, who's really an amazing activist and has been active since the 80s. The Coalition for Immokalee Workers is also really great. So if you want to support, if you have money, fund these organizations. They're fighting for human rights. They're fighting for the rights of our farm workers. If there are no farm workers, there is no food. You know, and for those watching, if you're in New York on Thursday from 4 to 6, there will be an action from CIW in support of the national boycott against Wendy's, because Wendy's has not signed on to the Fair Food Program, which supports farm workers against all of these injustices. So please come out, just go to their website and check it out. If you're in New York, join us. This is a national campaign, and definitely you can, you know, take action from where you are.
As I'm listening to you, Eloisa and LaTricea, about the energy of food, right? And I'm thinking about, you know, in veganism, and like when you're talking about meat, you can talk about the actual energy transference from the animal to animal, right? But also, I think LaTricea brings up a good point that there's still energy transference, even if you're talking about vegetables and roughage. There's still people who are touching and interacting with that food that is then being ingested. And I think, and I know for my own experience, that food feels better when it's loved on, right? Food feels better when it's nurtured, right? When my grandma was making my food for me, that went down a lot easier than, you know, getting it from McDonald's or something like that. And so that leads me to my point. And so in recent years, many Black, Latinx, and Indigenous folks have reclaimed or recentered ancestral farming practices as a part of their wellness journeys. This includes pregnant women and birthing people, many of whom are empowered by the pregnancy journeys of their own mothers and aunts and grandmothers and other matriarchs. And right now, women represent upwards of 40% of the agricultural labor force globally, yes, and grow much of the food for their families and communities, right? Bringing that love to that plate. Moreover, men's migration from rural areas to cities has only increased women's responsibility on the farm and driven the feminization of sorts of agriculture in many, many countries. Yet, many women are still seen merely as laborers, right? With little decision-making power rather than as independent farmers in need of support. So the gender agricultural productivity gap persists. And we see this all over, right? The women do all the work and we get paid the least amount, but we're supposed to be saving and fixing and doing for everybody with the little scraps that we get. And so my question is, how would you encourage and empower families who may be seeking to reconnect with the land and are facing these barriers?
Yeah, so I can start with that. So one thing, and I'm going to lift up a local organization here in Memphis called Black Seed. We're starting to see this national movement of young people really making, not just making bold statements, but really making that connection back to the land. And so specifically in Memphis, while we're a Southern city and we're quote unquote urban, there are many aspects of this city that is very much so rural. And a lot of our history, like I mentioned, like with my grandmother, and I wish that I would have pushed a little bit harder to pick up some of that knowledge, right, around the actual labor and physical connection to the land. But specifically with Black Seed, they're doing just that. So they're not just necessarily creating these urban farms and community gardens, because that is a whole nother conversation about how that has been co-opted. But essentially, they are trying to tap into what already exists in Black and brown people. We don't need white folks to come into our communities to teach us how to grow. We taught you how to grow. Our ancestors taught you how to grow. So I love this question where it talks about reclaiming. It's ours, and it's just rekindling that. It's stirring that gift up again, and then making that spiritual connection back. I also think, and this is still Mental Health Awareness Month, it's therapeutic to grow. It feels good. I loved, Anna, when you talked about, like, it's somebody that touched on these fruits and vegetables that you're bringing into your home, that you're preparing with your family and for your family. And I think that making that connection there is also really, really important. I think that especially like if you are a mom, and you're trying to balance a lot of things, even thinking about making that connection to growing, being your place of self-care and mental health, and just really getting down in the dirt, it feels good. It's a release. So I'm really excited to see all the promise of young people really reconnecting back to growing in multiple settings. So I'm from the South, bordering right here by Mississippi, a lot of rural land, but not being limited to where you can grow. And really, again, like decolonizing where you can grow. Everywhere was pretty much rural before we had all of this colonization. So really reclaiming our space as well when we think about growing.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think there's so much research coming out right now on nature relatedness, they call it, right? And so it's really interesting because basically the research just states, hey, if you experience the natural environment, it's good for you. It affects your mental health. It affects how well you may do socioeconomically. It affects your connection to eating plant-based foods. And so we have found that in our work, when we include children and mothers and youth in cooking the food, in showing them where the food is grown, they're more likely to eat the food. And so this is knowledge that we have had forever. This is ancestral knowledge. And one of the things that I think we can do, especially for people who live in built environments and in cities, find those green spaces, touch the earth, touch the soil. I think that a lot of times, we forget to do that. I once had someone tell me that walking barefoot is a white person thing. And I was just shocked. I was like, we've been walking barefoot and humans walk barefoot and have been for millennia, right? And so, as you were saying, there are all of these practices that have been hijacked. We have so much ancestral knowledge, so much agricultural knowledge. Right now, they're doing studies on how to divest from monocrops, right? Which is a system that started because of colonization. The dairy industry, another system that started out of colonization. Factory farms, another system that came out of colonization. So going from those systems of sustenance where we were connected to the earth to this has put us in a state where it is really challenging to break away with that. How do we do it when it's all around us? But there's such amazing people doing tremendous work, like Karen Washington, who I believe coined the term food apartheid, Leah Penniman of Soul Fire Farms. I mean, there are so many amazing Black and Indigenous and Latinx women who are growing food and who are leading these efforts. And to your point earlier, Anna, if women were actually given the support that people who I identify as men are given, they would actually yield 30% more, right? Because we are resourceful. We know how to make things go further. And so it's really important to support these women growers, these femmes that are doing this amazing work, and finding those spaces, reclaim those community gardens. Right now we're dealing with just a personal story here from New York. We're working with a group who took over a space. They were feeding the community and providing education, and after it was beautified, that space was taken from them. So they're in a fight with the city over land, which we see time and time again, right? We see it even when we do take land to grow food and feed the community through community gardens. Developers can come in at any point and sort of take that away. Another resource that if folks are really focused on health equity and growing food is a Praxis organization. And so they really have access to a lot of funding and resources on their website. And yeah, there's just so much out there that I think doesn't get highlighted. And I think one of the things for me that I tend to dislike a lot of the times when we talk about all these types of injustices is that the folks who are doing all of this amazing work are sort of pushed aside, and we're presented as these victims and always in this sort of struggle, and not as these resilient, resourceful, amazing beings who have survived 529 years of this invasion, right? And so it's really important, especially for our youth, for them to know that they have choices, that people who look like them are really working to take back the land. And, I just want to say, in reference to decolonization, that's a very real process, right? And I really try to separate it from decoloniality, because decoloniality is more about the mind, the relationships. But to me, decolonization is very much about, we are owed what we gave you, that you took for free, the land and the labor, and we want it back, right? And so it is a very much a direct action process.
Thank you to both of you. We just heard not only your incredible thoughts and feedbacks, but really being linked to these different groups around the country. So in addition to the climate crisis negative impact on maternal health, it also causes major mental health issues. According to the American Psychological Foundation, longer-term climate changes leads to a temperature-related illness and mortality, spread of vector-borne disease, respiratory issues, and allergic response, compromised fetal and child development, and threats to water and food supply and safety, among other impacts. Please share any birthing self-care practices to protect pregnant people's mental health as they are battling climate change and also taking care of their womb.
Yeah, so I can start. I'm actually going to use, I love anecdotes. That's how I roll. But we just had an amazing experience recently for our 6th annual Flint Weekend of Service. We uplift childbirthing people in a collaborative space that's also a part of our Black and Brown Alliance called Beauty Shop Crawls, where we literally hit up beauty shops and we chit chat. We have conversations like this, but from a community perspective. And recently, we had a dope young lady. She's the owner of Black Girls Do Yoga, and she did some mindfulness exercises with us. And so it seems like it's really simple, but she literally took us through these like phenomenal breathing exercises. And I'm gonna be honest, when she said we were gonna do some breathing exercises, I did do a side eye like, but y'all, it really works. It really works. And she did it in a way where it didn't feel like patronizing, right? Like it really gave us space to just pause. So it was one point that she said in particular, she said, when you feel like you're trying to center yourself and like your mind is racing, she said, think about all the things that are blue, even if it's something blue in the room, just literally think about things that are blue. Like, is this wall blue? Is this picture blue? And it really worked. It really worked. And just personally, I think about even when I'm trying to like pay for self-care, which I know was a privilege and it still doesn't work, I'll try to get a massage and I'm literally thinking about, I got this to do, this to do, this to do. Dang, I should have been doing this while I was getting a massage. And so literally that was so practical, but such a good strategy around one, realizing like, it's okay for you not to be okay, right? But then also like I felt seen because like our mind is always racing, even when our body is at rest. If your mind is not at rest, it's still very detrimental to your health, both mentally, spiritually, and physically. So I wanted to uplift that. I hope that blesses somebody. To be honest, like my whole week has been lit because I'm like, okay, let's pause. Like I'm on braid overload. Like let's pause, not just my body, but how do I temporarily pause my mind to connect to myself, to connect to God, and then also just connected to the earth again. So that's my 2 cents on that part.
That was great. I love it. I think rest is so important, right? But I think for folks who have been historically marginalized, we suffer from time poverty. We are working multiple jobs. We are fighting the system. And so we do have to remember that it's okay to rest. I think a lot of times there's a lot of guilt associated with resting. And that is something that we have to decolonize ourselves from. Again, is the idea that we have to consistently be hustling and working and changing, whether you're doing social justice work, whether you're working for a corporation. And I really love the NAP ministry. They do amazing work. They really pull you back in, and it's just like, stop it right now. You need to just center yourself. You need to take that breath. My amazing friend, Brielle Ringer, actually does similar work as you were describing, LaTricea, and she did an amazing session with them where I just felt the same way. And I was just like, I can rest, and that's okay. And I think for pregnant people to remember that taking care of themselves and resting is for that being that's growing inside you as well, right? And I think that because we are constantly in that state of survival, a lot of times we are just so conditioned to that heightened state, and we are in a constant state of stress. So when we talk about medicine and plant medicine, we also have to talk about that lifestyle medicine, right? Which rest is a part of. We cannot be, completely healthy if we could eat plant-based foods, smoothies all day, put our feet on the ground. And if we're in a constant stress mode, which obviously happens to a lot of people who are in a lot of different situations, we are really putting our bodies at risk and putting whoever is growing inside of us at risk. So it's okay. It's okay to rest. We don't have to feel guilty about it. We deserve that rest. We've been working a lot. We deserve that rest.
Ashe. And so I will bring up a tidbit that I'm reminded of. That statement of we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And I am willing to put money on the meme goes, our ancestors were not dreaming of us working. Our ancestors were dreaming of us being able to rest. Our ancestors were dreaming of us being able to go on vacation and go away and live in luxury. That is our ancestors' dream. And to kind of bring it back to the conversation around maternal health, that link as women, as people who have the opportunity to give birth, we not only house our own eggs, but the eggs of our grandchildren, right? And so it's our responsibility, not only for ourselves and our children, but for our lineage, for our legacy, to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because the things that we're experiencing as we are pregnant, and even before we're pregnant, is being imprinted genetically on our children and our grandchildren to come. And so I think that is very important as we're talking about the importance of self-care. When I'm thinking about taking care of myself, sometimes I'm like, oh no, well, if I do this one more project, then it'll be okay. It'll be better for my family. But when I think about the responsibility I have to the legacy that has yet to come, it makes it that much more important. And it's unfortunate, as you know, as women, identified folks, that you have to put it on somebody else before it makes sense or is important. But I think that link kind of helps me as far as making sure that there is connection to rest, connection to taking care of yourself. And then also, I know it's a privilege to be able to go outside of your house and feel safe and have access to green space, but there are literal nutrients in the soil that speak to depression and anxiety. That feeling of putting your hands, when LaTricea was talking about putting her hands in the soil and it feeling good, it feels good because there are things in that soil that mix with you chemically that help your hormones and help those chemicals in your brain to relax. And I think that if we have an opportunity to do that, even if you're sitting outside on your front stoop and getting that vitamin D, that's important as well.
I really want to amplify what you said, Anna, about everything, being carried to that being, and then the beings who are going to come after. As we all know, multi-generational trauma is carried. It changes the DNA, but we also have multi-generational healing and happiness. And so I really also like to think of it that way, of everything that we're passing down, can be changed. And as far as, the self-care, because we focus a lot on self-care being an individual responsibility, right? And I'm speaking to communities now. Self-care is a community effort. And so when we think about folks taking care of themselves, the Western concept of go to therapy, do this, take a bath, that's great. But working in community, if we are part of a community and we do see folks that are stressed, that are struggling, it's for us to come in and hold people and hold space for them and help in whatever way that we can, as our ancestors have historically done. I think we see in the system here where, there is a pregnant person, and unless they have an extended family, most of the time they're really going through it alone, especially single parents. And so if you are just an individual, if you're part of a community, people who live around you, connect with those folks, because we have to take care of one another. So self-care is not just from an individual perspective, but from a community perspective. And, for the psychologists and psychiatrists that are out there, when, you're telling your folks to self-care, to take time for themselves, and you are going into all of their different struggles, please factor in multi-generational issues that we have struggled with. I think a lot of the times that tends to be pushed aside, and that's very sad and challenging to see from folks who are doing mental health work, who are psychologists and so on, where this is not factored in. But your environment that you live in, if you don't have access to certain things, if you don't have access to green spaces, if you don't have access to food, if you, come from a group that has been historically marginalized, that's going to affect how you move through the world. And that has to be factored in when we do self-care, community care, and any type of psychological work as well.
I really want to uplift the NAP ministry that was mentioned earlier. I recommend that platform to every single person I know. And for those of you who might not be aware, the founder of the NAP ministry, a phenomenal Black woman, she will be releasing a book this fall. So be on the lookout for that. I also want to mention that Anna and I were both pregnant during this global pandemic, and we've had our 1 year postpartum, and I believe that postpartum is forever. And I think we're experts on this topic personally, as more recent birthing people. And I will say, besides rest, like I am very unapologetic about my boundaries. I say no when I mean no, and I say yes when I mean yes. Um, and I know not everyone is comfortable doing that. But I say this because it wasn't something that came naturally to me. It took a lot of practice. It took a lot of missed opportunities, but I kept going at it. And that really helped my mental health, not only in pregnancy and in postpartum. Finally, one thing I do want to mention is, being that Anna and I were both pregnant again during a global pandemic, having other pregnant people be in your support group, whether it's virtual, especially since I still think we're in a pandemic, or in person, if you're comfortable with that, was for me really a saving grace. Like to be able to know that Anna was in this journey with me during some of our lowest lows and our highest highs was what I think kept me sane a lot of days. And so I really want to give a plug in for finding folks who are actually in that journey with you, because other folks won't get it. They'll try to give you a snack, they'll try to put you to bed, but like other pregnant people, other parents will understand. So I really want to give a plug in for that. And just passing the mic back to Anna.
I personally want to say I love snacks. So
well, we take the snacks.
We love snacks.
We don't say no to snacks here either, y'all.
Right. But I definitely I would take someone who can identify with something that I'm going through way more than a snack, depending on what the snack is. But I want to ask our panel, what is one piece of advice you would like to give to our family, friends, and allies tonight to either rekindle or spark a newfound relationship with the earth?
So I can start, and this is just a reflection of myself in here too. Don't be ashamed at how you show up with rekindling your relationship with the earth. You heard me mention a couple of times where I was just like, I wish, and rest her soul, that I had been more intentional growing up, as my grandmother tried to show me how to do this work and to make a connection. It's all on God's time. So I'm not going to beat myself up about that. If it's anyone that's listening that wants to get into rekindling, because it's in our ancestors, right? It's innate, it's in us. So making that connection is on your time. So don't be ashamed if you're like starting from level one. It's all good. It's all good. Just get in there, and the earth will receive you just as you are.
You know, I really like to come from a perspective where, we have all the knowledge inside. We have been on this earth for so long. We have done amazing things. So while humans have done a lot of destructions, we have done amazing things like design the Amazon rainforest. It didn't just spring up by itself. Humans took all of these different parts and really designed it well together. So we're capable of so many amazing things, and just remembering that we have that innate knowledge that can really guide us in our work to recenter ourselves as part of nature. We are nature. We're not separate and apart. And I think when I spoke about that interruption between our earth, our natural environment, each other, our beyond human relatives, that's what has been disrupted. And decoloniality is for everybody. It's not just for the Black and Indigenous folks to decolonize. dehumanized. Everybody has been interrupted, whether you're being marginalized by this system or whether you're benefiting by this system. And so for the folks who are in power, support the groups, decentralize the money. And so all of us need to rest. And it's very, very important that I say that, because yes, we need to all reconnect, but we also need to make it accessible for everybody else to do so. So there are folks that can go out there and go hiking, right? But a lot of our folks don't feel comfortable doing that because those spaces have been separated from us, and only recently have we been reclaiming those spaces. That's the history of national parks in the United States. It's a very racist one. And so for our folks, just know that that knowledge is there to guide you. And for everybody else who wants to be a co-conspirator, decentralize those funds so all of us can take a rest, and so you can join us in this journey, because it's going to happen. We're all going to heal regardless of whether or not, some people get on the idea of healing.
That's so beautiful. It's so incredible what y'all are saying. And one thing that came to mind, Eloisa, when you were talking was I recently have been connected with Latino Outdoors, which is a nonprofit organization connecting cultura y community with the outdoors. And so I want to give them a plug in. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. Make sure you all find them. But what I like about it is getting folks together, whether you're Latino, Latinx, Latin, however y'all want to say it, you identify as Black. There are specific groups that are coming together and hiking, they're walking, they're swimming, whatever it is. And like how you were saying, Eloisa, like how do we do this in community and come proud and show up as a group and say, this is our space too?
Absolutely. We belong. We are here. And I recently had an event, so the Indigenous conference and forum at the United Nations that happens every year. And we did an amazing event with folks from Belize, Afro-Indigenous folks from there, from Siberia, from all over. And so it was this amazing room of folks who have to work and go to the UN to just reclaim themselves. And one of the leaders from the Garifuna Nation over in Belize, just such an amazing Afro-Indigenous woman, just said something that really stuck with me. And she said, we are wealthy, everything, we have everything. And that's why people have constantly taken stuff. So you are on our land, you have taken our resources. So we are wealthy, we belong here. We're not going to come in there begging and asking. We've been asking for a long time. And so we're not asking anymore. We're just showing up like we belong, because we belong. And I think that that's something that I really took away from that. And for so long, I have felt that way. And it's like, people are like, oh, how are you so this and so confident? And I remember my great-grandfather, so I come from a very diverse family, and everybody looks different, from very brown and white to very Black. And as a little girl, my great-grandfather would sit me down and say, your color is so beautiful. People go in the sun to have your color in your hair. And I didn't have a clue what he was doing, but I realized as I grew up that he was preparing me for this world, because this is the experience that we're having. And so he taught me that I belonged, and that I was going to show up, and that it was my place to be there. And so that's something that I want to say to all of our folks who for so long have felt that they don't belong. You're here. You're here.
Shay, thank you so much. I am full. So as we wrap up, I meant that pun right there. I did it on purpose. As we wrap up, I would like to thank you both for sharing your wisdom with us today. Could you please remind our viewers how they can follow your work?
Yep, so I'll go. Hopefully you're watching this live on Facebook Live with Black Millennials for Flint. Make sure that you like us at Black Millennials for Flint. That's the 4. Same handle on Instagram. And you can also follow us on Twitter at BM4 Flint. And that's also the number 4. Also, we're on YouTube as well, so check us out there.
Everyone can follow Chilies on Wheels work. Is the Chilies on Wheels on Instagram, on Facebook, and the website is chiliesonwheels.org. My email is just Eloisa, which is my first name, at chiliesonwheels.org. So ELOISA.
Thank you to our incredible viewers. We look forward to you joining us every fourth Wednesday of the month. In the meantime, please engage with us on social media and share this episode with a friend or two or 5 friends. Peace and good night.